Well, the first thing I'd like to say is I really didn't see this one coming. I certainly thought that they were putting Hillary in there. I think what may have changed the decision to steal the election if required is her health situation. I think they realized that her health is in such bad shape that she might not last through any significant amount of even a first term in the presidency. And again, it's the idea that the idea that has to be understood is that whoever's in this position is simply a figurehead slash puppet. It really isn't going to make that large of a difference as far as the end goal of what our lives are like. That being said, I don't think that Trump is as much of a globalist insider as is Clinton. So it should be interesting to see, as his presidency unfolds, how much he's going to really attempt to butt heads with the true powers that be behind the scenes. Because as we know, whenever that happens with somebody in a high enough level of a position of power or even figurehead power, it usually doesn't end well for them. Hence, what happened to John F. Kennedy and other people who had a significant amount of influence with large numbers of people. That being said, I think Trump is kind of like somebody who has played ball with them in the past, clearly, and he just sees like that the lower level people are all going to be thrown under the bus, so to speak. I think he's somebody who sort of realized that early on and decided he wasn't going to play ball with their full agenda. As far as how much he'll be able to actually do in this position, I'm not particularly hopeful. That's why I don't really put any faith or stock in politics at all personally. As much of the listening audience will know already, I am an anarchist and don't believe in the legitimacy of any form of government. So, I am not a supporter of either one of these puppet figures, but, realizing that Hillary Clinton is Bilderberg Steering Committee, Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, you're dealing with an avowed lifetime globalist there, whereas Trump is just, he's kind of like the newer member of the club and might still have a little bit of conscience not to go along with the agenda of these people. But again, we'll see how that plays out in the future. As they say, time will certainly tell whether this person is in any way as genuine as he claims to be. He's talked quite a big talk, but let's see if he actually does try to implement anything that goes against the globalist agenda that they have advanced thus far. It should be pretty interesting to see in the future. As far as putting stock in any politician, I just see that as extreme childlike naivete. And if people think that any political figure is going to solve the problems of the world long term, or quote unquote rescue us or save us, they are going to be sorely disappointed. This whole thing is about having to change your own mind, having to change your own consciousness, and ultimately having to change your own behavior. And I think that's why politics is ultimately so popular. Is it somehow promises that we can have all these positive external manifestations in the real world without going through that internal process of change in consciousness and ultimately change in personal behavior. And of course, that's not true. That's, of course, a lie. That can't be done. You can't have those external changes without the associated internal changes in consciousness and behavior. And sadly, I want to be fully honest about what I see happening in the world as far as this true work that we need to do, this true great work of change in ourselves and our own consciousness and our own actions is concerned. I'd kind of like to, in the light or in the reference frame of this most recent election here in the United States for the presidency, give people a take on where my personal viewpoint is and has been over the last year or so, because if I have to be perfectly honest, and I want to caveat this with that I want to say what I feel like I have to say regarding this, and be perfectly honest. Yet I don't want to be completely berating either. I want to try to temper this because it's not, what I have to say is not really good. I don't really see the awakening that many other people see. I mean, and I've considered that perhaps it's the area that I live in, which is a very, very low consciousness area in the United States, which I'll get to in a moment because it actually plays into what you opened up the whole interview with. The place where I'm at is the place where this country was founded. It's Philadelphia. I'm within walking distance where I live of Old City, Philadelphia, which is where the Declaration of Independence was signed, and where the founding fathers actually meant to begin this country. So, but to go back to my personal take on where things are at with humanity, I think that people are as lost as they have ever been. I think that, and I think it's getting worse, not better. I think that all the new forms of media have actually even further confused people instead of waking them up. I think that people have their head up their rear end, so to speak. Okay, it is really, really worse than what I have told anybody in the past. I think people are constantly looking outside of themselves. I think people are constantly acting in a very childish and naive way when it comes to the understanding of the illegitimacy of government. They think it's all legitimate. They think it's all just fine. They think life is fine, life is comfortable. A lot of people don't see the problem. Many people, when you tell them that slavery is taking place and that you are actually a slave and that you don't really own any property that you think you own, are confused, go glassy-eyed, don't understand what you're saying to them, actually believe that they're free, actually believe that they're protected and comfortable. And I think part of the problem is that they are too comfortable. I think part of the problem is they don't really see the absolute evil all around them. They don't see the psychopaths that are in the halls of power. They don't see all of the degradation of human rights and freedom that's taking place all around them. They don't see that they're ruled by criminals. And they don't care. They don't care that criminals have the reins of power. I'm telling you, all of this stuff that just recently came out about how Clinton's campaign manager was involved in dark occult rituals, and how her, friends and confidants are connected to pedophile rings. This is going on daily, every day. Children are being taken, abused, raped, and murdered by people in positions of power. This goes back all the way back decades before the Franklin cover-up, which people should read about, by former Nebraska Senator John DeCamp. The understanding of the pedophile rings that were operating in Oklahoma and in Nebraska. It's just, and this was nationwide. These people were trafficking these children nationwide. And you try to explain this to people who even think that they are a little bit conscious and a little bit progressive or a little bit on the libertarian bent, and they don't understand it at all. They don't want to look into it at all. They don't want to hear the word occult. They don't want to hear the word pedophile. They are walking around. People are walking around in the modern day completely blindfolded, 100% ignoring. I shouldn't say 100%, but the vast overwhelming majority, over 99% of people, are absolutely ignoring deliberately the heinous crimes and heinous dark occult involvement, the sick, depraved religion of these people in positions of power. And it's not some of them, Alfred. It's a great deal of these people all have connections to these organizations and groups. These people are vetted by these organizations and groups, which is why I have to say, I think a last-minute decision was made not to put Hillary in there and not to contest any of the election results. You didn't hear one peep out of the Hillary campaign side regarding this victory. And it wasn't any kind of a landslide. Some states had margins of votes that were less than 1,000 or a couple thousand votes. So And that's even if you believe or acknowledge that, they're really counting these votes in any way that matters. I just think that people are completely blind to what really goes on behind the scenes. They think that these people are just elected, have their interest in mind, and then go and really genuinely try to do what's best for the vast majority of the people. And I mean, if people still think that in the modern world, they're 100% asleep. They have no idea what's really going on behind the scenes in the realms of power in this world. They don't want to understand, because a deep understanding of the absolute evil that we are ensconced in will place firmly upon the shoulders of anyone who does understand it a moral obligation and personal responsibility to act in a way as such that you are doing something about it, to try to raise awareness of it to other people who are still asleep, or to actually take action, physical, real-world action, to make these people stop what they are doing, stop all the abuse of rights that they are conducting, stop all the theft that they are doing, stop all the violence that they are doing to people, and when you look at it, it ultimately all comes down to the people who will help and protect and serve this ruling class of people. And this goes back to my work on order followers. It's not the few politicians and bankers and people in occult organizations that are ultimately doing the work to oppress other people. It is the people who follow their orders and conduct absolutely violent behavior against people if they refuse to comply with the dictates of these quote-unquote masters or owners of other people. And they look at them as having total legitimacy, and they say, I'm not going to think for myself. I'm not going to exercise my conscience. I'm not going to decide for myself the difference between right and wrong behavior. I'm just going to listen to what somebody else tells me and then carry out that behavior, because that's easier than thinking. And I think it's a testimony to how asleep the world really is and how much they still don't get it. When I personally type in the term order followers into a search engine, and I'm horrified by the results, because my name is about the only name that comes back regarding anybody talking about the dangers of order followers and them following the orders of their globalist masters. And that's horrifying to me. I would want to be 1 in a million people who are talking about that dynamic in the world. That's what would make me happy. If I had to hunt for my name for hours, if I typed in the term order followers into a search engine, if I couldn't find my name because there were so many people talking about it that I had to hunt for my name for hours instead of it being the top search result that comes up when you type in that phrase. That is a disgusting dynamic to me. And it's proof that exactly what I'm saying is true, that people still don't understand the importance of the illegitimacy of following orders, the illegitimacy of government. And I would really like to start reaching out more to the so-called libertarian community, because I think these are amongst the most asleep people in the world, to be honest. I think the whole so-called freedom movement has some of the most deeply asleep people, sadly. And here's the reason. Unless you understand the occult world, you are not awake. I just want to reiterate that again and try to explain that to people very concisely and clearly. Unless you understand the world of the occult, the workings of the occult, the knowledge that the occult world is hiding from humanity deliberately, you are not awake. Unless you hold the knowledge of the occult, you are not awake. Unless you have actually studied it, gone into it, integrated it into your mind, into your consciousness, you're not awake. You are not a conscious human being. Because ultimately what the occultists, the dark occultists who are ruling this world, who currently are the powers that be in this world, what they have known regarding occult knowledge, the occult knowledge that they're trying to keep back from the people of the earth, What it ultimately contains is the objective knowledge of the difference between right behavior and wrong behavior. It is objective moral knowledge. And what they are doing is saying, we know what right is, we know what wrong is, and we are willfully trying to insulate ourselves from the consequences of choosing evil over good by getting order followers to do our dirty work for us. And therefore, they see it as the brunt of the karmic debt and karmic consequences that they would receive from having to get their hands dirty and do this vile violence unto people themselves. They're getting other idiots to do that work for them. Follow their orders, do that dirty work for them, and therefore they'll take the karmic consequence of the wrong behaviors being chosen and enacted unto others. And that is what the dark occult has ultimately done. They have turned natural law upside down on its head by getting people to follow their dictates and follow their orders and do the behaviors that they don't have the guts to do, because some of these people are such weaklings that they couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper bag. And at the first sign of any kind of physical reprisal, they would wet their pants. And, you know, this is part of the problem, is that other people in their absolute ignorance are still willing to listen to what these people tell them to do. And I see absolutely zero sign of that changing. I see zero sign of people quitting their jobs in those capacities, in the police and military and in government in general. I see absolutely no change in the viewpoint, in the worldview of people regarding order followers. I don't see people that think that order following is an absolute degradation of the human soul. I see people who just think it's perfectly fine to take these positions in the world, to take these jobs. And I don't see any sign or proof that this dynamic is changing whatsoever. I see a very insignificantly tiny pocket of people in the world who are even looking at this data, who are even looking at this information, who are not ignoring it. And what they generally do is take in the information and do nothing with it and just, you know, say, oh, now I know. And they think that that's all that they need to do. And I don't see the truth community deeply growing in any way that is of any significance whatsoever, because I see a lot of dross coming into the whole truth community, to be honest. I see a lot of content that is, quite frankly, garbage. I don't see anybody touching on the main points of objective morality. I don't see anybody touching on the main points of understanding what knowledge the occult holds and hides. I don't see many people talking about the absolute illegitimacy of a ruling class, hence the illegitimacy of government. I don't see anybody talking about the absolute illegitimacy and immorality of following somebody else's orders and not using your own knowledge of the difference between right and wrong, which is what conscience is. I see no evidence that the world is changing in that direction. And it's extraordinarily depressing to know how the extent that I have given up what I have ever wanted to do with my life, to do the work that I have done to bring these topics to to bear in people's minds, and to realize that it has had almost an absolute negligible effect. I'm not saying it hasn't changed some people for the better. I'm not saying that what I've done has been completely worthless. I'm just saying, as far as that ball being picked up and ran with, I don't see any evidence of it. I see that I'm an isolated, tiny little pocket, an anomaly in the matrix talking about these things. And I just don't see people acknowledging it to the point where they are running with that information and teaching it to others, and then that having a wider impact in our society. I don't see evidence of it at all. That's where I think the world is at right now. I think we are as asleep as we have ever been. I think we are more than ever looking for a savior and looking for external solutions to problems which are firmly rooted in the way people think. The problem is firmly rooted in the mind, and I do not see any evidence that people's mindset is changing in numbers that are large enough to have any impact in our society to change it. I see people who are 100% ignorant, 100% asleep, 100% unconscious, having more and more children and teaching their children the same absolute drivel that they believe in and thinking that they're doing a good thing. You know, all of these people who think that they're doing such a good thing by joining organizations, you know, I mean, people involved in promoting politics and violence through government is at an all-time high. I mean, my doorbell has not stopped ringing non-stop by people from political organizations coming to people's homes to try to persuade them to get involved in the process of voting for a master. I mean, and they think they're doing something good. And they have looked into nothing. If you talk to these people, they know nothing about anything. They don't know about geoengineering. They don't know about genetically modified food. They don't know about the dangers of pharmaceuticals. They don't know about the dangers of the established medical system. They know nothing about fractional reserve banking. They don't know anything about the Federal Reserve System. They know absolutely zero about the occult, and if you say the word, they run away. They have absolutely no idea about the illegitimacy and violence that's inherent in government. They have absolutely no idea about objective morality and the difference between right and wrong. They're all moral relativists, and they love it. They love it. They love voting for masters. They love not knowing the difference between right and wrong. They love thinking that everything is just arbitrarily up to us to decide what right is and wrong is. They have no moral or logical contradiction that there could be a law in one place that allows a behavior and in another place it forbids the behavior and that behavior is punishable. And they could say both of those things can exist simultaneously, and I see no contradiction in that, you know, because they're moral relativists. They actually believe morality is relative, and there is no objective difference between right and wrong behavior. And as such, they will never act upon conscience. They will only ever act upon emotional swaying in one direction or another, emotional outbursts, emotional gauging of information that comes their way. That's all they do, is they gauge things with their emotions. They don't have logical thought. They don't care about logical thought. They don't care about morals at all. You know, they just think that whatever somebody votes and decides is law is just fine, and that's the law, and that's what we have to live according to. And this is the epitome of Satanism. This is what Satanism is. I've been trying to explain to people for almost a decade of my life what Satanism is, and I see nobody understanding it. Hardly anybody getting it, hardly anybody understanding it, hardly anybody wanting to do anything with that information, wanting to take it to other people. And even in the so-called libertarian communities, it's amongst the worst. When you try to explain to them that these people are Satanists, they don't want to hear it. When you try to explain to them that Satanists own government, Satanists own the police, Satanists own the military, Satanists are running all of these organizations, they're running the police, they're running all of the hospitals, they're running all of the health organizations, they're running all of the banks, they're running all of the media outlets, they're running all the sports distractions. Everything is owned by these people. Everything is completely owned and run by them. And when you say that to people, even within the so-called freedom community, they'll try to call you a conspiracy theorist. And there's no theory about it in my mind. I was with these people. I worked with these people. For almost a decade of my life, I worked with these people. I know their black-heartedness. I know their level of evil. I know their level of psychopathy. I don't think I know. I wasn't told about it. I didn't read about it in books. I was there with them. I know definitively, 100%. It's not a belief system. It's not a theory, you know? So, and I understand, I realize not everybody has had my experiences and not everybody has been in the positions in life that I've been in. I get it. I understand, you know? So some people are going to have to understand that secondhand. But you know what? There's unimaginable resistance to it because these people love their ignorance. They love what the ignorance implies. The ignorance implies I don't know, so I can't be held responsible to do anything about it. And they want it to stay that way. They're willfully and consciously choosing to remain in that fearful level of ignorance. And guess what? That's the worst place anybody can be. And that's where I see the majority of the human species at. I see them at that place in unconsciousness. And that's one of the worst places that you can possibly be at. And I don't see any evidence that it's changing in any large-scale way, not in any way that reflects large numbers large enough to actually tip the dynamics in our society into a different way. People will insist that the whole thing with Trump is a sign that, oh, people are waking up and, you know, they're ready to do things differently, and they're voting a non-politician into office. You know, well, we did the same thing with Ronald Reagan, you know, and what happened as a result? You know, they took a shot at him in his first couple months in office, and then he said, whoa, I know who really runs things, and didn't do a damn thing after that, went perfectly along with all of their agendas right after that. I don't see any evidence that that will change, especially since Trump has, you know, a significant family as well. So it's all a pipe dream that any of this is going to be changed with politics. It's all a pipe dream that it will be changed by reforming the monetary system or reforming the political system. This is going to require, to change anything in this world, as evil as it is and as completely broken as it is going to take infinitely more of a colossal personal change in consciousness and a complete revitalization of the human will. The willpower of the individual is what is going to have to be radically shifted to the greater good, to the, I mean the greater form of good. I don't mean the vast majority of people. I mean true goodness, real goodness, really understanding what good behavior is, not the nonsense morals that are taught in religion. You know, and all the tolerance that's taught in the New Age movement as well. We shouldn't have the level of tolerance for evil and bad people that we do. This is another big distraction and another huge disservice to humanity. The New Age movement that has taught all kinds of absolutely erroneous spiritual concepts to people is what's allowing this evil to continue to reign unchallenged. You know, the idea that we shouldn't be angry, the idea that we shouldn't want any kind of retribution against these people for the absolute horrific evil that they have done unto children. I mean, when you, I highly encourage people, just watch the video Conspiracy of Silence. Watch the video Who Took Johnny. Read the book The Franklin Cover-Up. And you will understand that these are people in the positions of power in this reality, and they are absolute pedophile Satanists. They are raping and murdering small children. Read the new Podesta email leaks that came out of WikiLeaks. Okay? Understand they have an entire system of child trafficking set up in this nation. That they have code words that they use in their emails to describe small boys and small girls that they are trafficking amongst each other. John Podesta himself saying, my partner is out. Emailing somebody, my partner is not here for the night. I want pizza for an hour. I mean, who even talks like that? Who says you want pizza for an hour? You know, you don't say you want pizza for an hour. You might say you want pizza in an hour. And who orders pizza only when their partner is gone? You know, the word pizza in the whole pedophilia rings has been a known code word for a small girl for decades in the black web and in the black market community, the criminal black market community. You know, they're talking about pasta and hot dogs. You know, well, you think the elite of the world are eating hot dogs and pizza? You don't think they're going to the finest dining restaurants in the world with the finest foods and finest wines and stuff like that? Like, you really think they're sitting at home emailing each other about whether they're going to have hot dogs or pizza for dinner? I mean, you got to be an absolute mental midget. You have to be the biggest moron on earth if you think they're not talking about the trafficking of children. You know, what do you think he's going to have for an hour? It's not going to be pizza, okay? And you know, you look at all the other leaked documents that came out about how they blackmail people up to the level of presidency, as in Nixon. All these new documents on Nixon being involved in pedophilia have just recently come out. Involved with the former Australian Prime Minister who brought young girls to service Richard Nixon on his plane, on his private plane in Australia. The girl drew vivid images of being led up to the runway to the plane, going up the stairs of the plane, onto the plane, Richard Nixon being on the plane, and then being forced to perform sexual acts with Richard Nixon, a 10-year-old girl. I mean, it's hideous that this has gone on for over a century and is continuing to go on today. There's no change in any of this. This is continuing as rampantly as it ever went on. And, you know, everybody's just trying to make excuses. They say, oh, no, this isn't evidence of pedophilia. Nonsense. You know, it's not even somebody being a naive child about it or being fearful about it. They like it the way that it is. I'm the person who's going to say these people are as black-hearted evil who ignore this as the people who are doing the crime. I mean, just think about it. Arguably, is it not just as bad for somebody to sit there and watch somebody do a heinous crime, if you have the ability to do something about it to stop it, as the person who's conducting the violent behavior? It's practically just as bad. Some people will say it's not quite as bad. You're not the one actually doing it. You're the one allowing it to continue. That's what's going on here. That's what's going on in America. People completely allowing this absolute hideous behavior to be enacted upon small children. And they're not trying to go to these people and storm their homes and take them out and conduct justice upon them. They're not trying to get them arrested and thrown into a prison cell. No. They're making excuses for them and saying, oh, you don't really have proof of that. No, you can't extrapolate what they're talking about. When that's a known code word, when these same words they're using, they didn't even bother to change them, are known code words in the black market community for child trafficking, because that's what they are. They're child traffickers, they're drug traffickers. That's what they do. They keep pumping all these drugs into society. They're the ones bringing in all these substances into the inner cities. You know, they're pumping in all of these to keep people docile, to keep them docile. They don't want people as awake as somebody like me. They don't want people as ready to take action as somebody like me. No, they want you docile. They want you accepting. Now, this is just the way it's always been. This is just the way it's going to continue to be. Just accept it. Forgive, accept, forgive, accept. Yeah, and that'll keep going on, and these people will rule you unchallenged. And they're going to get it to a point where they're going to have you on a cattle car, taking you to an execution camp. And just like the Jews in Germany during the World War II period, you're going to be saying, they're just doing what's right for us, and they're just relocating us temporarily. In concentration work camps, where Jews were being worked to death in Nazi Germany, there is evidence that they were saying to each other, this is all just temporary. They're just relocating us. They were telling that to each other while they were in the death camps. That's how asleep those people were, and that's how asleep the people are today, that they'll be in death camps at some future point, and they will be saying everything is okay. And that's where I see where the world is at. I personally don't know what anybody is talking about when they talk about some type of a worldwide awakening. I see no evidence of it whatsoever. I'm not trying to be dark. I'm not trying to be alarmist. I'm not trying to be just depressed and always looking at the negative or the glass half empty. I'm trying to be as honest as possible about what I personally see in the world on a daily basis. That's all. I could get a little bit passionate when I talk about these things because it is upsetting, okay? But I could also just coldly, calculatedly say, I see zero evidence of the dynamic changing in any significant way. You could say, yes, small, tiny little fraction pockets, these tiny little slivers that may or may not amount to anything, at some future point, depending on where these people take this knowledge, how they distribute it. But right now, do I see any appreciable change happening in the world that leads me to believe that humanity is going to somehow be fine or somehow is going to win their freedom? No evidence of it whatsoever. This is part of the reason, it's not the entire reason, when I come back onto the airwaves and doing a podcast and eventually a video cast again, I'm going to explain to people why I've taken such a long hiatus. I don't know if I'll get into it today, but part of the reason also is I've slowed down with all of this is I'm extraordinarily in a very depressed mindset regarding what impact my work has really had, or anybody's work telling the truth. I don't really see it having that much profound positive impact. I see it having impact on a very small scale with individuals. Societally, the whole truth-telling community has had negligible impact at all. And that's what I'm really talking about. I shouldn't even use the word my work. I should use the term our work. All of our collective work has amounted to a hill of beans right now. I mean, to be honest, I'm just trying to be honest. And I think that can still change. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying we're doomed and there's no hope. Okay? But right now, I have had to take a seat on the bench for a little while. Because to continue to do something that I see as having no movement is draining. It's completely and totally draining. And I'm sort of waiting for some people to play catch up, and I'm waiting for other people to take up some of my slack and run with it. Because if I just do it all, and I keep putting out this work, and nobody else is putting it out in any way that's effective, what's the point of one person doing all of that? It's not up to me to do all of that work. That this is a shared work. This is not Mark Passio's great work. It's not what it's called. It's called the great work of humanity. We need to be doing this work in way bigger numbers. And the numbers just are not there. They're not there. And what that's going to lead to is more and more people who are going to look for external solutions or even see external, forceful, and violent solutions as a stopgap to being able to delay the inevitable slavery of humanity, which is what a revolution is, ladies and gentlemen. What do you think? The American Revolution was conducted by the absolute most conscious human beings who had all the spiritual knowledge that they needed to acquire. It was conducted by a lot of totally ignorant people who just saw, if we don't do this, there's nothing else. That's what a revolution is for. That's what a physical, combative, armed revolution is for. It's the people are all saying, we didn't really get to where we needed to get in mind and in heart, so we got to do this with weapons. And that's coming. That's going to come inevitably, invariably, unwaveringly, must occur. If the change does not happen in consciousness, the change must occur physically. It won't be the change we need. It will be a change, though, and it will be a bloody, horrific change, okay? But it will invariably, unswervingly go to that end result. And then we will get the new opportunity, which is why it's called a revolution, to then do it the right way again. And if it doesn't happen the right way again, we'll do it with blood again and continue to do this cycle over and over and over again. And that's, you know what that is the definition of, folks? That's a little thing called hell, which is where we are. That's where you're at, okay? If you haven't figured it out yet. We're stuck in a hell cycle of doing the same thing over and over again in pure ignorance and insanity, which is what insanity is, just doing the same thing, thinking you're going to solve the problem when it never has worked that way. Because people don't want to get the knowledge of the difference between right and wrong. They don't want to get the knowledge of the occult, the hidden knowledge about how the laws of nature and the laws of morality work. Understand that this is what is ultimately being hidden from you by these people who are ruling over you, because they are in that level of knowledge and you're in that level of ignorance. And until people open their eyes to what the occult is and understand that this is a tool, that it can be used for good or evil, and that the people who hold the knowledge right now are evil, and they're using this knowledge for their nefarious purposes, keeping people in ignorance of it, nothing is going to change. This is why out of all the people I ever encounter in the so-called freedom movement, I would say, if I had to give an estimate, 1 in maybe every 400 or 500 have any working knowledge of the occult. If that. And I might be being generous. Okay? And we believe somehow that the people in this movement are going to be responsible for some grand change in human life. I mean, the people who are following these people are the blind leading the blind. It's the blind following the blind, because they have not hit upon any of the genuine, real topics that need to be discussed. And many of them are scared because their own peer group will frown upon them as they frown upon me. I'm telling you, libertarians look at me like I'm a demon. They don't want to hear any of the stuff that I talk about. They don't want to hear it all. They want people blowing smoke up their rear ends, telling them there's going to be a financial solution to the crisis we face. We're going to vote the right person into office one day from the Libertarian Party. He's going to get in there and make all the changes that are needed to be made. That's what they want to hear. They want somebody amongst their own rank blowing smoke up their rear end. They don't want to hear somebody saying order followers are going to have to quit their jobs, because they can't even imagine that happening. When I tell them, you got to give up the notion of the belief in money. Money's a religion. They can't even imagine a society that doesn't have a monetary system. And many of them can't even imagine a society where authority isn't looked at as legitimate, and we don't have a government or a ruling class anymore. They can't even see that is how devastated their imagination is in the community that is advocating for rights and more freedom. And they think they're going to get it by these political and financial measures. They're delusional people. They don't understand that this is not about changes in politics or finance. This is about a change in consciousness. This is about changing the way you think about reality. And you tell that to people, and they're like, whoa, you stay right there and keep saying that. I'm going to run this way as fast as I can, because they don't want to hear it. That's what's required of your change in your mind and in your heart and in your behavior. No, they don't want to hear that. They want people doing this. It's that. No, it's you. It's you that's the problem. See? That's what it is. You got to stop doing this. You got to stop doing this, and you got to start doing this. When people start doing that, that's when I'll admit that there's some change in consciousness taking place on Earth. But right now, I'm sorry to say, I don't see it. Maybe it's because I live in a communist community. I am in one of the largest communist strongholds on Earth right now. That's what Philadelphia is. Philadelphia has been 100% taken by communists. Okay, this needs to be understood by people not only who happen to have the misfortune of living in the city of Philadelphia, but all of the United States. People who live in the United States really need to understand that, in particular, the three cities of Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and New York, are 100% communist taken. To a slightly lesser extent, Boston as well. Okay? These cities are taken by communists. Okay? And people still don't know what communism is. They don't understand it. I tell people, have you ever looked at the high holidays of Nazism, communism, and Satanism? Just look up that little dynamic. Find out what the high holiday of Nazism was, the high holiday of communism was and is, and the high holiday of the dark occult community. And you'll discover something quite interesting. Okay? Do it to confirm what I'm about to tell you, but they're all the same. It's the same day of the year. Out of 365 possible choices, you would think that Nazism, communism, and Satanism would somehow have enough room to find a different high holiday for the ideologies that they represent. But no, they're all the same. May 1st, Walpurgisnacht, May Day. Okay? Because all of these things are the same. There's no difference between them. They want total control. They want enslavement of the human species. They want the destruction of objective morality. They want the destruction of natural law, meaning the laws of morality and the consequences that people receive by choosing either moral behavior or immoral behavior. They want to be insulated from that natural law, that moral law. Okay? And they want 100% total destruction of the human soul. And they have largely accomplished it already. They've largely accomplished it. Because all I see out in the community, when I walk outside my house in this community, it is a collection of brain-dead, soulless zombies who do not care about right or wrong at all. They don't care about the difference between right and wrong. They want somebody else to guide their lives, to run their lives, to give them free stuff, okay? They are totally identified. See, they identify my team, my sex, my race, my income bracket, my political party. They're totally ego-bound and ego-identified with what's mine. This is related to me. My small little ego. And so I'm going to just it doesn't make a difference how criminal this person is. She's a woman. She's a Democrat. I'm going to vote for her, And other people will say, oh, it doesn't make a difference how criminal or how dastardly or horrible mindset this other man is. I'm a man. I'm going to support him. I'm going to support this. It's like, I don't want to support anybody. I want to support what's right. I want to support right over wrong. It's the only factor of consideration that I take into consideration. That's it. It's the only factor I take into consideration. I'm not interested in what's going to make me more money, what's going to make me more popular, what's going to have me have more friends, what's going to have me have more possessions. I don't care. I don't care about any of that stuff. The only thing I care about is it right? Is it moral? That's it. The end. And you ask people out on the street, look, you could ask this to people in the freedom movement, in the libertarian community. What is a right? The vast overwhelming majority of the human population cannot tell you the definition of a right. Cannot do it. How do you possibly expect that we are going to be able to preserve any modicum of human rights when people in the overwhelming majority of the population don't know what a right is? But there's a huge awakening happening in humanity, folks. The overwhelming majority of the human population can't speak the words to another person of the definition of a right. And yet, there's a huge, massive shift in consciousness happening. I mean, this is how bad it is, And I wish I could come and give people an update, a report to tell them it's all getting better. We're making moves in the right direction. I see it all changing. I would love to do that. I'd love to be able to do it. I'd love to, but I cannot in good conscience. I think in many ways, if I did that, I'd be doing a complete disservice to humanity by lying to them to make them feel good about where things are headed.